talk about life and love and information. Let's talk about life and let's talk about love.
Good morning. This is Valvalie Harity, broadcasting from beautiful St. Petersburg, Florida. I want to thank my sponsors, UPS at 2nd and 2nd South, a full-service UPS store that is now open on Sundays. And if you need anything at all, including office supplies or a mailbox or anything at all in the business line or shipping line, UPS has it. So, passport photos too. So thank you, UPS at 2nd and 2nd for sponsoring my show. And I also want to thank Neil Van Eerd, who's donated the song you just heard. I put a call out quite a while ago asking for an original sound, original theme. And Neil supplied it, and there were a lot of people that responded, but he's the one who had the chops. So I want to thank Neil. Thank you, Neil. Love you. So here we are today in beautiful St. Petersburg, Florida, dealing with a Gordian knot. And a Gordian knot is an expression that means there's something so complicated that it can't be untangled. But all things eventually can be untangled if you do enough research. So I've been researching this issue of Spa Beach Park and the placement of an art object there, a gigantic art object there that offended me. And I felt it was inappropriate, but I didn't understand the dynamics behind it. And although I've been following it for over 2 years, I never really started researching it until some things didn't make any sense. There were a lot of rumors flying around. I don't like rumors. I don't like to listen to them. Well, sometimes I do, but I don't like to share them because all my life I've been research-based. I'm a clinician, clinical social worker, an analyst, a Jungian analyst, and people like me go into the weeds. That's an expression meaning, get in the details, or maybe it's an expression meaning get lost in the weeds. I don't know. The weeds are everywhere, aren't they? And the swamp is full of weeds, too. So I got into details, and I started doing my homework and doing research. And thank God, because everything you really want to know is online. Plus, I've been very active in the community. I've been here 13 years. I've had this radio show for 5 years. I volunteered in many, many charities for many years. I sponsored 8 very successful art shows. I'm an art lover, an art collector. I've been all over the world collecting art. And that's not a brag, it's just a passion. But, and I've got a limited pocket, but I know good art. I was raised by an art appraiser. My mother's brother was, and he and my mom, who loved art and collected it, we would go all over when I was a kid, before school, after school, on Saturdays. I was dragged along. And I learned art at a very, very early age. My playground was the Art Institute in Chicago. So I know art. And I understand that not everybody likes the same piece of art. But I also understand through my training as a Jungian analyst the symbolic nature of art. What does it really represent? Why is this look the way it is, and why does everybody love it? And I'm not going to get into archetypes now. That isn't why I'm talking today about this particular piece of art. But my eyes are trained a different way through all these years. 30 years I've been doing my work. So I've got a different, I look beyond. I I often say, ask the third question. And most people don't bother asking the third question. It's an expression that means, something, you're curious about something, you ask about it, you get an answer, you might ask a second question that sort of satisfies you, but you never ask the third one. And the third one is usually the beginning of the truth. So that's a little tip and clue for all you folks that are curious about something, or something troubles you, or you're suspicious of something. Ask the third question, and ask the 100th question if you have to. So I've been trained that way. That's just the way I've been trained, and that's how I am, and that's who I am, and I'm really good with that. So here we have this issue, and it came to my attention because it offended me. This particular piece of art offends me. I'm sorry. I know the artist is, as they say, world acclaimed, but that doesn't mean anything to me. What means something to me is my beautiful city, the city I moved here for the park system in this city. What offends me and troubles me, I don't care that the artist is hurt. I'm sure she's not. I'm sure she doesn't even know I don't like her art. But my passion is the city and the parks. And I spent hours and hours and hours of my time in the 13 years I've been here in the city park system. I know it's won international awards. I know it's stunning, it's beautiful, it's pristine. It's a real park. It's a park in the classical archetypal sense. We have parks. So when I saw this monstrosity, is the only way I can express it, the size was just, it was almost laughable. It was almost like a cartoon to me. I thought, you got to be kidding. And that really started my curiosity about this. I thought, what's up with this? So I learned some things. And I want to tell you what I've learned, what I know to be true, not what I've heard. But this goes way back. This is over 2 years that this piece of art was discovered. It might even be longer than that. But the decision to purchase it was made a long time ago. This isn't some, impulsive purchase. I was told, and if it's not true, sue me, that Bob Devin Jones suggested this particular piece of art, or this artist, that Wayne Atherall liked it. He was the head of the art commission here in St. Pete. He liked it. They brought it to the art commission, and apparently they must have liked it, because suddenly the city has a $2.5–3 million purchase. This was all done impulsively. Well, not impulsively. I think the decision was impulsive. The mayor fell in love with it, and he's clearly passionate about it. He's clearly adamant about getting this piece of art in our parks. But the original thought, when it was brought to him, was it was going to be on the pierhead. It was going to fly in the air in all its glory at the head of the pier, out at the end. And I thought, first of all, that's crazy, because that's a flight pattern for Whitted Airport. So I thought a lot of things were wrong with it. But then I didn't think about it anymore, and that's when I first heard about it for the pier, until suddenly it lands. It's supposed to land, fly off the end of the pier and land in Spa Park. It's very, very clear to me that nobody ever gave Spa Park and its history and its charter protection one thought. Either they didn't know or they didn't care. But the first thing I did was say, wait a minute. And because I know the park so well, I've spent so many hours in them, I've read about them, I've read all the history of the parks, I know the awards they've won, I know how much people love them, I know that We're a city of about 250,000, something like that. I've never met anybody who didn't love the parks, and most people I've met and talked to moved here for one of the big reasons they moved to St. Pete was the city layout and the parks. Now, my next show is going to be about something called a sense of place. So I'm not going to talk about that much today, but I want the listeners, you folks, to start your own research. I want everybody to ask that third question. And then there's a second question, and nobody asked this question either. Nobody that I can imagine, had they asked this question, would have approved this piece of art for that location. And the question is, and then what happens? And it's a serious question I've used throughout my practice, 30-year practice, helping people grow and thrive and overcome their complexes and their addictions and things like that. They'll have all these wonderful ideas, and I will simply say, and then what happens? And that sort of grinds people to a halt because it's about consequences. I'll tell you a quick story. I was a wonderful client. He was the son of a seriously alcoholic father. He was struggling to get past his history with his father, and he fell in love. He was so excited he was in love. He said, this is it. So he starts telling me about his future partner, how much he loves her, how wonderful she is. He can't wait to start a family. Now, he's not married yet. They've just met. But he's ahead of himself, but that's okay. He's in love. And so in one of our conversations, I said, well, does she want kids? And he stared at me like, I don't know, almost like in shock. And he said, well, gee, doesn't every woman want kids? I said, well, yeah, I suppose, but, it's not a bad idea to find out for sure if you're going to buy a $20,000 wedding ring and go that next step. I don't have to tell you what happened, do I? She didn't want kids. She never wanted kids. But in all his passion and love and adoration for her, he just made a lot of assumptions. And I think that's a parable for what's happened here in St. Pete about this piece of art. People assumed. No one ever bothered. Nobody, or I don't think it would have gone this far, ever bothered to look at the status of the parks. What's a passive park? It's clearly defined as a park that has no construction on it. That's the most you can have on the classical passive park is a bench. Even that is questionable. It's parks, go look it up. Passive parks have no development on them, none. And that's the classic legal definition, because I looked all this up. I got really into it. And then I also realized as I'm looking around and searching that Campbell Park is a passive park. But they've built something on it. They built some sort of food thing. I haven't seen it, but I know it's designed to make money. You can't profit from a passive park. There's all kinds of subtle rules, nuances, things that are common knowledge that passive parks are passive for a reason. They're designed to neutralize the stress of an urban city. You go to urban landscaping sites, which I have spent a long time on those too, you find out about the purpose of a passive park. You find out a lot of things. That's where I stumbled across a sense of place, which is huge in urban architecture. It's huge. That's always why every smart architect will put, a courtyard or some natural thing in his structures of note. There's always some atrium with light coming in or something like that. because urban planners and developers understand the value of nature in an urban setting where stress, noise, and all kinds of things are going on. And wasn't it wonderful, and isn't it wonderful to be along Beach Drive with all the noise, and on Central with all the noise, and looking west, and all you have to do is turn around and you'll see passive, you'll see calm, you'll see serenity. We all need that. We need that specifically today. So meanwhile, and this is tied in with the drama of the pure, the people spend a lot of time, energy, and money. I think I went to at least a dozen meetings for the new pier. Everybody had their input. Nobody listened. The mayor went ahead and built the pier he wanted. And we're going to talk about consequences, and we're going to talk about a lot of things about this, because this is all this Gordian knot. It's all tied together. We have a gigantic piece of art meant to be put on a new pier that the city didn't vote for, and it's a bad fit. And so, what do we do with it? What do we do with it? Suddenly, it can't be where the big plan was, because there was no plan, there was no thought. And I'm going to say this out loud to the world: everything about this was thoughtless. There was no thought, there was no research, there was no study of the urban environmental distress. There was a study by there are studies, but they're not available. We're finding them though. Thank you, my group at the Safe Spa Beach Park, because they're all digging like they're going way back beyond the third question. And so we're finding out a lot of things. So I'm just saying to you that when a city makes a decision ignoring all the advice of every urban planner and city planner and environmentalist that this is not a good idea, nobody sat down with that, or if they did, their opinions were brushed aside. They were ignored. And that's part of the Gordian knot. So, the purchase is made, a huge, huge, huge amount of money. And it's passed. It doesn't pass through the council, though. The Art Commission signs off on it. Not only do they sign off on it, they pledge $250,000 of our money to pay for it. I mean, this has really got what we call chutzpah, you know? I kept saying, well, who do they think they are? You know, there's some delusion going on here. To purchase a piece of art that size and put it in that location without even understanding the nature of a passive park, that's either ignorance or ballsy. I don't know which, and at this point, I don't care which. Because unintended consequences that are affecting some of the people that made this decision are coming to haunt them. What are the unintended consequences? What is the third question? What is the and then what happens thought? Because now all the passive parks in St. Pete are on the chopping block. So that's huge. And if you don't understand how huge that is, I'm telling you, don't call me, don't email me, don't write me, don't text me. Go find out yourself what that really means to a city. But first, I'm urging you to look at a sense of place. Understand what it means. Understand why every urban architect in the world understands that and takes it into account. Our forefathers certainly did. When they planned this city, they certainly did. They protected the parks. Our city charter has, I think, 13 or 14 parks that are designated as passive. So there's a reason for that. They understood 100 years ago what it meant to have a serene, contemplative, stress-free environment attached to their city. They understood that. They were wise. They weren't greedy. They were wise. They fought for it, by the way. There was a huge fight. Others wanted the whole waterfront as a commercial development. So that's part of our history. So that's way back then. So the wise forefathers, did a lot of things that make our city unique. One of them is this passive park designation. We have 7 miles of fabulous parks, award-winning parks. 7 miles. This is along the waterfront now because this is what we're talking about. We're talking about our waterfront, which is our sense of place. Our sense of place is the waterfront. Our sense of place is Spa Beach. And I said that and I found that out and I'm getting emotional about it because it's being plundered. It's being corrupted. So it's not anymore for me about the land. It's about the idea of our sense of place being stolen, being sold to the highest bidder. It's the heart and soul of St. Pete. It is the heart and soul of St. Pete. Matter of fact, it is. Because I've researched, and I've got hundreds of photos where everybody that markets St. Pete, everybody that wants to attach themselves to St. Pete, everybody that poses when they visit here, that Spa Beach is usually in the photo somewhere. Brides get married with it in the background. I was thinking, boy, would the brides not want that neon thing in the blinking in their background, right? So there's so many reasons not to have it there. So many reasons my mind is boggling because there's so many reasons not to have that gigantic piece of art there, and still the mayor carries on. They are actually trying to change our city laws, to accommodate this gigantic piece of art. Now that's incredulous to me. It's incredulous that the city would go to the lengths of changing the status of their parks to accommodate something nobody wants but the mayor. And this is incredulous to me. And it's not going to happen. I can tell you that right now. How do I know that? I know that because I wanted to see if I was alone in my disgust. And so I started a little Facebook page. It was called Save Spa Beach Park because I wanted to hopefully get a little group together. And, I'd already done my research then. I already knew that they shouldn't have put it there or wanted to put it there, but they didn't do their homework. They never even understood until recently the idea of a passive park and what it meant. So once they found out, they scrambled to change the rules for the city to accommodate this gigantic piece of art. It's incredulous, okay? But you know what? Who played the violin when Rome burned? Nero, I think, Emperor Nero. History is replete with foolish, self-will decisions that come back to haunt people. Somebody told me, and I checked it out, and it's true, there was this gorgeous fountain planned in our neighboring community, Clearwater. It was gorgeous. It was big. It was expensive. It lasted 2 years. Let's look at Tropicana Field. We paid for that, my friends. We never got our money back. And the city can't wait to get rid of Tropicana Field. The developers are salivating. And there's not going to be any concessions to any other cultural groups. There won't be. Trust me on that. So here we are stuck with this huge bill for this huge building, the ballpark, Tropicana, never fully paid for, and it's going to be torn down. Now, what's up with that? So, it's a problem. It's a Gordian knot. I just now decided to name the show a Gordian knot. So let's get back to Spa Beach and the passive, active designations of parks. Let's go to the Waterfront Master Plan. Okay, something I attended at least, I don't know, a dozen meetings for the Waterfront Master Plan. I mean, every time I turned around, there was a meeting. But this was a different administration, and I'm not talking politics now, I'm talking how somebody perceives their city. I'm a Democrat, for the record. So this isn't about politics for me. Nothing has ever been about politics. It's always been about, are you smart? Are you doing the right thing? Are you taking care of yourself, the people around you? You know, are you thinking? Are you going beyond the third question? Do you have a sense of consequences? Do you ask yourself, and then what happens? Those are all the signs of an intelligent, thoughtful leader. So when all this came along, we all ran to meetings. Every time I turned around, I mean, I was seeing, we started like getting to know each other and hanging out and everything because the Waterfront Master Plan. Now, what was special about that? Well, outside of it was very, very expensive, the city called in experts from afar. I believe they were based, I think, in St. Louis or somewhere, their home office. But anyway, they were known urban planning experts, and they came in to evaluate our city for a 50-year, the goal was for a 50-year master plan for our city. And they loved our city. They absolutely loved it. They were thrilled with the waterfront, absolutely thrilled. Now, these people, all they do is evaluate cities. They were so impressed that there was a grocery store downtown. The Publix over on University Plaza. They were so impressed with everything. And they looked at everything. I've read it. I haven't read it recently, but I know it well enough to know traffic patterns. They were thrilled that a man who recently died, I think 2-3 years ago, a city planner, that had 275 broken into 2 exits, one 175 and the other 375, that lead to the heart of the city. Have you ever driven down a highway, an expressway? How often can you get to the heart of a city in 3 minutes? Not often. You trust me. So there was a great deal of foresight and thought that this man said, hey, wait a minute. If the city grows, we need another exit. And we have 2 exits. And that's such a wonderful thing. You have no idea. You drive up and down the quarters of Florida, you don't get to the heart of a city in 1 minute. You're lucky if you can find a McDonald's. So this is a big deal. And people aren't appreciating it, but I am. And I'm hoping after this broadcast you will too. So we have the infrastructure, we have the highways that come almost to the waterfront. We have the protected parks, thanks to our forefathers. So the Waterfront Master Plan, they're just absolutely thrilled to death with what we've done. I remember the big meeting at the Vinoy Hotel, and there was hundreds of us there, and how they talked about the beauty of our city, how they talked about the width of the streets, which is an unintended consequence because now we've got the Grand Prix roaring through our streets. It wouldn't be here if our streets weren't that wide. But that's another story. But the point is that we had everything, and we had this classical architecture. And they love that. They love that sense of antiquity blended with parks, blended with grocery stores, blended with urban highways that come right to your door almost. They absolutely love that. They couldn't say enough about our city. So they go home and they create the Waterfront Master Plan. And it's wonderful. One of the things in it, and by the way, you can go on your computer, you can download St. Petersburg Waterfront Master Plan and read it yourself. You don't have to listen to me or anybody else. But it's clear on that. That Spa Park is to remain a passive park. It's perfectly clear on that. If there is to be art on the waterfront, it's to be around the head of the pier, the foot of the pier. I get mixed up. Around Second Street, 2nd Avenue North, where the street that runs into the pier by the History Museum. That's where they recommended art. And there's charts and there's graphic drawings designating that. Some sort of significant piece of art. Now I'm going to switch gears because I use the word art a lot in this. Another thing I discovered, and I finally found proof, concrete proof, when there was a call for art for this signature piece, this giant piece, it was what they call an anchor piece, that there were 5 artists that were approached. And only one artist, the artist they chose, of the 5, only one got a feasibility amount of money of, I think, $75,000 for a feasibility study. And when I said, did any of the other artists get $75,000, the answer was no. So this was a done deal. This was foregone. So here we have all these local artists who are ominously silent, by the way, in this particular issue. It's kind of scary. I'm not hearing from the so-called leaders of the art community, and I never heard them advocate for their own artists. I never heard them gather as a group and say, hey, we want in. They're ominously silent, and I'm very curious about that. But right now, I don't care about that, but I'm curious about it. So here we are, the city of the arts. People come from all over to see our murals. Is there a mural on the pier? No. Are there any local artists on the pier? No. Now what's up with that? Why aren't we supporting our own art community? This is not good. This is a disintegration or an undermining of our sense of place. We're a small city. We're not Paris. We're not Amsterdam. We're a small city. Everybody knows each other, almost. I know we have an influx of new people. They don't know this history. I ask all of you, if you're sitting around, you say, what is she talking about? I'm asking all of you to just go online, download the Waterfront Master Plan, search for the city charter. Neither one of them thought, certainly the city charter, but the Downtown Waterfront Master Plan specifically indicates they want Spa Beach left alone because they understood the value of it. They're thinking people. They're planning people. They understood the value of it to our city. They understood the value of our parks. They know the nature of passive. Campbell Park should not have had a structure put on it. So there's these problems of like lack of being informed, lack of caring. I don't know if it's ignorance or chutzpah or arrogance. I don't know. I just know it's not right. It's not right for us. It violates our sense of place. It violates why we all have moved here. The parks are sacred. They should never be monetized. And this is another thing that I noticed about 6 months ago. Suddenly there's a neon sign on the Mahaffey garage. I said, a neon sign? It's right by the way, I live near there. I said, what the hell? And so I said something to the building manager. I said, you know there's a neon sign on the garage? She says, well, no, I leave at 5. I said, well, there is. And I sent her a picture. And in the picture, now, I know about the third and fourth question at this stage of my life. I say, I wonder if there's going to be any more. I wonder if this is the beginning of something. She says, I don't know. So, guess what? About 3 weeks later, there's a second sign on the Mahaffey garage. Crown Cars. It's neon. It's neon, for God's sake. The waterfront, Mahaffey, by the way, is owned by the city. So now I'm paying attention. So the other thing that triggered some concern for me was when my little doggie, Miss Nina, was alive, God rest her soul, her little loving soul, we would go out and we'd spend a lot of time in the parks. Well, in the last 6 months or so, I've taken her. There's no parks that don't have an event in them. Our parks are being monetized. They're being taken away from us and monetized. There wasn't one park on the waterfront in downtown on many weekends that didn't have an event on it, a money-making event. That's a lot of wear and tear on our park system. So now I'm really concerned. Then I heard, this is a rumor, but I'm going to say it. If it's not true, I'll apologize, that there used to be a limit in the park system on how many events you could put in a park over the year. There used to be guidelines and limits. Well, I've heard that that's no longer true. So you can have an event once your passive park becomes an active park. You can have a food truck rally. You can have somebody selling expensive cars. You can have anything the city wants in your passive park. And I want you to really think about that. You can have a carnival, for God's sake. Once your parks, local parks, are active, anything goes. So you have got to be diligent here. You have got to help prevent this. It's very ironic. Talk about unintended consequences. One of the women on the Arts Commission at the last council meeting is very, very, very upset now that her park, the park sitting under her nose, is going to become active. She's very upset. And that's her unintended consequence. I don't blame her, by the way. So all this monetizing of our beautiful natural parks has got to stop. Or at least somebody has to be thoughtful about it. I don't want to see neon signs all along the waterfront. The pier is turning into a gaudy commercial mess because all they're talking about, they're building, in spite of all the concern about the local restaurants, in spite of all the concern, the so-called concern, they're building more and more and more restaurants. They're building, the whole pier is going to be one big commercial zone. And you know what? There's going to be unintended consequences for that. It started out to be, it was called the Pier Park. It was parky. I thought, gee, another park. That's cool. Wait until you see what they've done to it. And by the way, the tune of that pier now is $80 million and climbing. And we're stuck with the bill. Just like we're stuck with the bill for Tropicana Field. So I think I've hopefully laid out, well, I'm clear about my feelings, and I hope they're understood. If anyone has a problem with this broadcast, so what? I'm past that point. I'm just past that point. I'm so disgusted that it doesn't matter. I've spoken in my truth. I've spoken what I know. I know the research. I know the players. I know that there was a point where nobody wanted this when it got to be so thorny, and it's pushing down our throat, pushing down our throat, pushing down our throat, forcing this on us in a very aggressive, very hostile, very dark way. And we just have to stop it. The city council has to stop it. All of them have to come to their senses. This is not about politics. This is not about the mayor. This is not about the artist. In a way, this isn't even about the parks. This is about our sense of place. This is about what makes St. Pete great. Why do people flood the city? Why do they come here? Why do they come back and buy property? Why do they come back and stay? If we had a different leadership, the focus would be on, first of all, fixing the sewer system. Nobody's even paying attention to that anymore. And I remember, a year or so ago, I finally said, listen, I don't want to live in a city of concrete with the sewer smell off the bay. I'm out of here. And believe me, I'll be out of here. Because this isn't what I bought into. So please understand that I'm feeling strongly about this. I've done my homework. I hope everybody else does theirs too. Understand the stakes that the stakes are very high. The very nature of our city. Somebody contacted me and said, you know what I don't like? And I said, no, but join the party. He said, I don't like the fact that all our family-friendly events are under fire. And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, they canceled the fireworks, but they didn't reschedule them. I said, well, I don't know much about that. I've heard many stories about it. He says, well, the bottom line was we didn't have our fireworks. We had all these people coming to our fireworks. Our fireworks were famous. They were a big draw. All these people came, these family people, mainly, obviously, kids. We didn't even reschedule. So I said, well, that's true. We didn't reschedule, and I didn't like that. I was embarrassed that we didn't reschedule. Gulfport didn't have fireworks that night. By the way, the same supplier is for both cities. And they called the supplier and said, gee, can we reschedule? And he said, sure, what night do you want? And they had fireworks, and half the people, well, not half, but many of the people from St. Pete went to Gulfport and saw fireworks over the 4th, or right after the 4th. Why didn't we reschedule? We weren't even kind to the people who made an effort to get here. We're very ungracious. And then the guy said, and what about first night? I said, well, see, I don't know. I've been so focused on Spot Bark that I haven't paid a lot of attention. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, that's a family event. Why does the mayor want to cancel that? So, of course, he's now got me thinking. So I said, you know what? I don't know, but if you would be kind enough to sit in front of your computer and start doing some research and homework and get some history and have a deeper understanding of the background of all of these things that concern you, you can come to the council and have something to say. And of course he says, well, I'm working. And I said, okay, but don't ask me because I don't know. But guess what? You would know if you did your homework. Be the guy who does their homework. Be the person who finds out. Almost everything is a matter of record. Almost everything. Find that record. Say, hey, wait a minute. Find out the history of first night. It's a fabulous, fabulous night. I made the decision to buy my condo at first night, sitting on the wall looking at fireworks with my son Michael, who said, "Mom, this city is perfect for you." And it was. And I know I understand growth and change, but growth and change does not have to be the expense of our sense of place. So I'm going to close now. This is not about the art. This is not about the mayor. This isn't about the pure. This isn't about politics. This isn't about party affiliation. This is about our sense of place. And it's very important that we fight to preserve that, because guess what? A city that loses their sense of place loses their tourism. A sense of place, a strong sense of place, is tied directly to tourism. It's all through these articles, every single one I read. And one of the examples they give is Paris. You won't find commercialism in Paris. It's there, but you just don't see it. It's not in your face, blazing on hundreds of feet, with poles that are 8 stories high that are lit up at night. It's crazy that we would do that to Spa Park. The other city, one of the urban planners mentioned, is the city in Texas, Austin. And their motto is, let's keep it weird. Everybody floods to Austin for the young people. I don't know a young person that hasn't gone to Austin. Every city has their sense of place, a city of note. In the San Francisco, I'm going to end now. I'm tired. But I feel like I've said what I need to say. I hope people will start paying attention. I hope people will ask that 3rd, 4th, and 5th question. I hope people will sit down and say, hey, and then what? And look at consequences of their actions and their decisions. I think about that woman, and I actually felt sorry for her on the Art Commission, who suddenly her decision is coming back to haunt her. The unintended consequence. And by the way, our sense of place isn't for sale. You can't barter it away. You can't sell it. It's our sense of place. It belongs to all of us. Thank you.
Let's talk about life. Let's have a little conversation. Let's talk about